The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Jefferson High School as students shuffled into their third period AP History class. Among them was 17-year-old Maya, a quiet girl who usually preferred sitting in the back corner where she could blend into the crowd. She had always been the type who spoke only when called upon, keeping her thoughts to herself and her head down in the hallways. Mr. Patterson, a middle-aged teacher with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, stood at the front of the classroom arranging his papers. Today's lesson was about military sacrifice and service throughout American history. The walls were decorated with faded posters of historical battles and famous generals, creating an atmosphere that felt both educational and somber. As the bell rang and students settled into their seats, Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and began his lesson. He talked about different wars, brave soldiers, and the sacrifices families make when their loved ones serve in the military. The classroom was unusually quiet, with most students actually paying attention for once. Today, we're discussing how military service affects not just the soldiers themselves, but their entire families, Mr. Patterson explained, walking slowly between the rows of desks. The children, spouses, and parents of service members often make sacrifices too. Maya found herself thinking about her mother, who had been deployed overseas for the past 6 months. She missed their evening conversations and weekend movie nights. The house felt empty without her mom's laughter echoing through the halls. "Now, I'd like to hear from you," Mr. Patterson continued, adjusting his glasses. "Do any of you have family members who have served or are currently serving in our armed forces? Please feel free to share their stories." Several hands shot up immediately. Jake, a football player sitting in the front row, proudly talked about his grandfather who fought in World War II. His voice carried confidence as he described the medals his grandfather had earned. The class listened respectfully, nodding along with his story. Next, Ashley shared about her older brother who was stationed in Germany with the Army. She spoke about how hard it was when he missed family holidays and birthdays, but how proud she felt knowing he was serving their country. Her voice cracked slightly with emotion, and several classmates offered supportive smiles. Maya listened to each story, feeling a familiar ache in her chest. She thought about all the times she had to explain why her mother wasn't at school events or parent meetings. The nights she spent looking at old photos while waiting for a video call that might never come because of her mother's unpredictable schedule. As more students shared their stories, Maya found herself slowly raising her hand. Her heart pounded against her chest like a drum. She had never really talked about her mother's job at school before. It seemed too complicated to explain, and she worried people wouldn't understand. Mr. Patterson noticed her raised hand and smiled encouragingly. "Yes, Maya? Would you like to share something?" The classroom fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Maya could feel her palms getting sweaty as she slowly stood up. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "My mom is a Navy SEAL," she said simply, her fingers unconsciously touching the small trident pin she wore on a chain around her neck, hidden beneath her shirt. For a moment, the room remained silent. Then, like a dam breaking, whispers and snickers began to ripple through the classroom. Maya could hear bits and pieces of what her classmates were saying. Did she just say SEAL? Girls can't be SEALs. She's making that up. Why would she lie about something like that? Brad, one of the popular kids who sat in the middle of the room with his group of friends, turned around in his seat with a smirk on his face. "Come on, Maya," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. "Everyone knows girls can't be Navy SEALs. You're obviously making this up for attention." The whispers grew louder, and Maya could feel her face burning with embarrassment. Her hands started to shake as more students joined in the mockery. Some were laughing outright now, while others were shaking their heads in disbelief. "My dad's in the Marines," called out Tyler from across the room. "He told me SEALs are all men. There's no way your mom could be one." Maya wanted to explain that her mother had been one of the first women to complete the rigorous SEAL training program. She wanted to tell them about the late-night phone calls, where her mother sounded exhausted but proud after completing dangerous missions. She wanted to show them the photos of her mother in full gear, standing with her unit in places Maya couldn't even pronounce. But the words wouldn't come. Her throat felt tight, and her eyes began to sting with unshed tears. The laughter and whispers seemed to grow louder with each passing second. "Maybe she means Coast Guard," suggested one girl, though her tone wasn't kind. "Or maybe she's confused about what her mom actually does." "Yeah, maybe she's like a secretary on a Navy base or something," added another student, causing more giggles to erupt around the room. Maya looked desperately at Mr. Patterson, hoping her teacher would step in and defend her. But Mr. Patterson seemed uncomfortable with the situation, shifting his weight from one foot to the other and looking uncertain about how to handle the disruption. "Well, Mr. Patterson stammered, clearly wanting to move past the awkward moment. "Thank you for sharing, Maya. Let's move on to our next topic." But the damage was already done. As Maya sank back into her seat, she could still hear her classmates whispering and occasionally glancing back at her with expressions of disbelief and amusement. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, and she spent the rest of the class staring down at her desk, trying to make herself invisible. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the period, Maya quickly gathered her books and tried to leave the classroom. But as she walked toward the door, she could hear Brad talking loudly to his friends. "Can you believe she actually tried to tell us her mom's a Navy SEAL?" he said, laughing. "What's next? Is she going to tell us her dad's an astronaut?" His friends laughed along, and Maya felt her stomach twist into knots. She hurried out of the classroom and into the crowded hallway, where she could blend in with the hundreds of other students rushing to their next classes. As she walked to her locker, Maya pulled out her phone and looked at her last text message from her mother, sent 3 days ago from somewhere in the Middle East. It was just a simple, "Love you, sweetheart. Stay strong." But now those words felt more important than ever. Standing there in the noisy hallway, surrounded by laughing teenagers who had no idea what real strength looked like, Maya made a quiet promise to herself. She would stay strong, just like her mother had taught her. Even if nobody believed her, even if they all thought she was lying, she knew the truth. Her mother was a hero, and Maya would never be ashamed of that, no matter what anyone said. The next morning, Maya woke up hoping yesterday had been just a bad dream. But as soon as she walked through the school doors, she realized her nightmare was just beginning. The whispers followed her like shadows down the hallway. "That's the girl who set her. Mom's a Navy SEAL," she heard someone say behind her. "Can you believe she actually thought we'd buy that story?" Another voice added with a laugh. Maya kept her head down and walked faster toward her locker. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, and the familiar knot in her stomach tightened with each step. When she reached her locker, she found a sticky note attached to it that read, "Liar," in big, bold letters. Her hands trembled as she peeled off the note and shoved it into her backpack. She didn't want anyone to see how much it bothered her, but inside, she felt like crying. This was supposed to be her safe place, her school where she'd been going for 3 years. Now it felt like enemy territory. During her first period English class, Maya noticed that her usual seat partner, Jessica, had moved to sit with someone else. When Maya tried to catch her eye, Jessica quickly looked away and pretended to be busy with her notebook. The message was clear. Jessica didn't want to be associated with the girl everyone was calling a liar. At lunchtime, Maya grabbed her tray and looked around the cafeteria for somewhere to sit. Usually, she sat with a small group of girls from her chemistry class. They weren't her closest friends, but they were friendly enough and always saved her a spot at their table. Today was different. As Maya approached their usual table, she could see them all huddled together, looking at someone's phone and giggling. When they noticed her coming, the conversation suddenly stopped. "Hey, guys," Maya said quietly, setting her tray down in the empty chair. The girls exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Lily, who Maya had known since middle school, spoke up. "Actually, Maya, we're kind of having a private conversation right now. Maybe you could sit somewhere else today?" Maya felt like she'd been slapped. These girls had never been mean to her before. They'd worked on group projects together, studied for tests, and shared snacks during break time. But now they were looking at her like she was some kind of stranger. "Oh?" Maya managed to say, picking up her tray with shaking hands. "Okay, I guess I'll just—" She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she walked away, searching for an empty table in the crowded cafeteria. Finally, she found a small table in the corner, usually reserved for kids who got in trouble and had to eat lunch in isolation. Maya sat down alone, staring at her sandwich without really seeing it. From her corner table, she could see other students pointing in her direction and whispering. Some were showing their phones to friends, and Maya had a sinking feeling that her humiliation from yesterday had spread far beyond just one classroom. Later that day, Maya confirmed her fears when she checked her social media accounts. Someone had created a meme using her school photo with the caption, "When you lie about your mom being a Navy SEAL for attention." It had already been shared dozens of times, with comments ranging from laughing emojis to more hurtful remarks. "This is so embarrassing," one comment read. "Why would anyone make up such an obvious lie?" "Attention seeker much?" wrote another. "My uncle's actually in the Navy and he says women can't even try out for SEALs. She's totally making this up," claimed a third. Maya wanted to respond, to defend herself and her mother, but she knew it would only make things worse. Instead, she closed the app and threw her phone onto her bed in frustration. That evening, Maya was doing homework in her room when her phone buzzed with an incoming video call. Her mother's face appeared on the screen, and Maya felt both relief and worry wash over her. She was desperate to talk to someone who understood, but she didn't want to burden her mother with her problems while she was deployed. "Hey, sweetheart," her mother said, her voice crackling slightly through the connection. Maya could see she was sitting in what looked like a small, bare room with concrete walls. "How was your day?" Maya forced a smile. "It was okay, Mom, just the usual school stuff." "How are things over there?" Her mother looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, but she smiled back. "Busy as always. We've got some important training exercises coming up, so I might not be able to call as much this week." "That's okay," Maya said, though her heart sank a little. These calls were often the only bright spot in her day. "You look a little sad, honey. Everything all right?" her mother asked, studying Maya's face through the screen. Maya hesitated. She wanted so badly to tell her mother everything, about the humiliation in class, the mocking comments, the way her friends had abandoned her. But looking at her mother's exhausted face, knowing she was thousands of miles away dealing with dangerous situations, Maya couldn't bring herself to add to her worries. "Just missing you," Maya said instead, which wasn't a lie. "Mom, can you tell me more about your training? Like what it was like when you first started?" Her mother's expression softened. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, Maya. There were days when I wanted to quit, when everyone around me said I'd never make it. But I kept going because I knew I belonged there, even when others didn't believe in me. Did people ever say you couldn't do it because you're a woman?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "All the time," her mother replied honestly. "Some people have very narrow ideas about what women can and can't do. But you know what I learned? The only opinion that really matters is your own. When you know who you are and what you're capable of, other people's doubts can't touch you." Maya nodded, wishing she could feel as confident as her mother sounded. "I'm really proud of you, Mom. And I'm proud of you, sweetheart. You're stronger than you know." Her mother glanced at something off-screen. "I'm sorry, honey, but I have to go. We've got a briefing in a few minutes. I love you so much. Love you too, Mom. Stay safe." After the call ended, Maya sat staring at her blank phone screen. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, but they felt impossible to apply to her current situation. How could she not let other people's opinions affect her when those opinions were making her life miserable? The next few days followed the same painful pattern. Maya would arrive at school to find more cruel notes in her locker. Students would stop talking when she walked by, then burst into whispers the moment she passed. Her former lunch companions continued to avoid her, and even teachers seemed to look at her differently. In her chemistry class, when the teacher assigned partner work, Maya found herself paired with Tommy, a quiet boy who usually kept to himself. As they worked on their experiment, Tommy surprised her by speaking up. "You know, my older sister was in the military," he said quietly, not looking up from their test tubes. "She always said there were women doing jobs that most people don't know about. Secret stuff." Maya looked at him with surprise. It was the first time in days that someone had said something that wasn't mocking or cruel. "Really?" she asked hopefully. Tommy nodded. Yeah, she said the military's changing, but a lot of people don't realize it yet. He paused, then added, I don't think you're lying. It wasn't much, but it was something. For the first time since this whole mess started, Maya felt like maybe she wasn't completely alone. There was at least one person in this school who didn't think she was making everything up, but Tommy's quiet support couldn't undo the damage that had been done. As Maya walked home that afternoon, she realized that her life at Jefferson High had completely changed. The girl who used to blend into the background was now the center of unwanted attention. The quiet student who never caused trouble had become the school's most talked-about liar, and the worst part was, Maya knew this was only the beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Maya first mentioned her mother's service, and things had only gotten worse. What started as whispers and sticky notes had grown into something much bigger and more painful. Maya dreaded going to school each morning, but she forced herself to get up and face another day of humiliation. The breaking point came on a crisp November morning during the school's annual Veterans Day assembly. Maya sat in the back row of the packed auditorium, trying to make herself invisible among the hundreds of students. The stage was decorated with red, white, and blue banners, and a large American flag hung behind the podium. Principal Williams, a tall woman with short gray hair, stepped up to the microphone. Good morning, students and faculty. Today, we gather to honor the brave men and women who have served our country in the armed forces. The assembly began with the usual presentations. The school choir sang patriotic songs, and a local veteran spoke about his experiences in Vietnam. Maya found herself thinking about her mother, wondering where she was at that exact moment and whether she was safe. Military families sacrifice so much for our freedom. Principal Williams continued after the veteran's speech. The children and spouses of service members show incredible strength while their loved ones are deployed. Maya felt her heart racing as the principal's words hit close to home. She thought about all the holidays her mother had missed, all the school events where she'd sat alone because her mom was overseas. Now, Principal Williams said, looking out at the sea of students, I'd like to invite any of you who have family members currently serving or who have served in the past to stand up and help us honor them. Tell us about their service and what it means to you. Students began standing up throughout the auditorium. Maya listened as her classmates shared stories about grandparents who fought in World War II, parents stationed in different countries, and siblings serving in various branches of the military. Each story was met with respectful applause. Maya's hands gripped the edges of her seat. Part of her wanted to stand up and finally tell everyone the truth about her mother's incredible service. But she remembered the humiliation from her history class and all the pain that had followed. As more students shared their stories, Maya felt a growing frustration building inside her chest. These same people who were now clapping respectfully had been mocking her for weeks. How could they honor other military families while treating her like a liar? Without fully realizing what she was doing, Maya found herself slowly standing up. Her legs felt shaky and her heart pounded so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. The auditorium seemed to grow quiet as students noticed her standing. Principal Williams spotted her and smiled encouragingly. Yes. Would you like to share something with us? Maya's mouth felt dry as sandpaper, but she forced herself to speak. My mother is serving overseas right now, she began, her voice barely loud enough for people to hear. She's been deployed for 6 months, and I haven't seen her since last spring. So far, so good. Maya could see some students nodding sympathetically. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe in this setting, talking about honoring veterans, people would finally listen. My mom is a Navy SEAL, Maya continued, her voice growing slightly stronger. She's risked her life on missions I can't even know about. She's one of the bravest people I know, and I'm proud to be her daughter. The change in the room was immediate and crushing. Maya could hear the familiar whispers starting up again, like a wave of disappointment washing over the auditorium. Students began turning to look at each other with expressions of disbelief and annoyance. Oh no, not this again, she heard someone mutter. She's still telling that stupid lie, whispered another voice. But the worst moment came when Brad, sitting in the middle section with his friends, decided he'd heard enough. He stood up in his seat and called out loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Sit down, Maya! Nobody believes your lies." The auditorium erupted. Some students started laughing. Others began talking loudly to their neighbors about Maya's attention-seeking behavior. The respectful atmosphere that had filled the room just moments before completely disappeared. Maya stood there frozen, her face burning with embarrassment as hundreds of eyes stared at her. She could see teachers trying to quiet their sections, but the damage was already done. Principal Williams was saying something into the microphone, but Maya couldn't hear the words over the buzzing in her ears. Unable to take another second of the humiliation, Maya grabbed her backpack and ran. She pushed past other students in her row, stumbled up the aisle, and burst through the auditorium doors. Behind her, she could hear Principal Williams trying to restore order, but Maya didn't stop running until she reached the nearest bathroom. She locked herself in a stall and finally let the tears come. All the pain and frustration she'd been holding in for weeks poured out in heavy sobs. How could they do this to her? How could they mock her during an assembly meant to honor military families? It felt like the cruelest possible betrayal. Maya stayed in that bathroom stall for nearly an hour, crying until she had no tears left. When she finally emerged, her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked like she'd been through a battle, which in many ways she had. The rest of the school day passed in a blur. Maya went through the motions of attending classes, but she couldn't concentrate on anything the teachers were saying. Students continued to stare and whisper, and she overheard several conversations about her breakdown during the assembly. Near the end of the day, Maya was called to the principal's office. She walked there slowly, dreading what was waiting for her. When she knocked on Principal Williams's door, she heard a gentle, "Come in." Principal Williams was sitting behind her desk, looking concerned and tired. She gestured for Maya to take a seat in one of the chairs across from her. "Maya, I wanted to check on you after what happened this morning," she began kindly. That was a difficult situation. "And I'm sorry it got out of hand." Maya nodded but didn't trust herself to speak without crying again. "I've been hearing from other teachers about some ongoing issues you've been having with your classmates," Principal Williams continued. "Would you like to tell me what's been going on?" Finally, Maya found her voice. For the first time in weeks, she told an adult the complete truth about everything that had been happening. She explained about the original incident in her history class, the social media posts, the cruel notes in her locker, and how her friends had abandoned her. Principal Williams listened carefully, occasionally asking questions or making sympathetic sounds. When Maya finished her story, the principal sighed deeply. "Maya, I can see how much pain this has caused you," she said. "Bullying in any form is not acceptable at this school. However, I have to be honest with you about something." Maya's heart sank, sensing what was coming next. "Without some kind of documentation or proof about your mother's service, it's very difficult for me to address the students who are expressing doubt about your claims," Principal Williams explained gently. "I can certainly talk to them about being more respectful in how they express their opinions, but I can't force them to believe something they find hard to accept." Maya felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Even the principal, this adult who was supposed to protect students, was essentially calling her a liar in the nicest possible way. "So there's nothing you can do?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can speak to the students about treating you with more respect," Principal Williams offered. "And I can make sure the social media harassment stops. But Maya, you have to understand that claiming your mother is a Navy SEAL is, well, it's an extraordinary claim. And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence." Maya left the principal's office feeling more defeated than ever. Even the adults didn't believe her. Even the people whose job it was to protect students thought she was making everything up for attention. That evening, Maya sat in her bedroom staring at her phone. She had her mother's contact information right there, but she'd been avoiding calling for days. How could she tell her mother that nobody believed in her service? How could she explain that her daughter was being treated like a liar because of who her mother was? But as Maya sat there in her empty house, surrounded by the silence and loneliness that had become her constant companions, she realized she couldn't handle this alone anymore. She needed help, and there was only one person in the world who truly understood what she was going through. With trembling fingers, Maya pressed the video call button and waited for her mother to answer. It was time to tell the truth about everything that had been happening. It was time to ask for help. Maya sat on her bed that evening, staring at her phone for what felt like hours. Her finger hovered over her mother's contact name, but every time she got close to pressing call, her courage failed her. What if her mother was in the middle of something dangerous? What if she was busy with an important mission? Maya had always tried to be the strong daughter who didn't cause problems while her mom was deployed, but tonight felt different. Tonight, Maya couldn't pretend everything was okay anymore. Finally, she pressed the call button before she could change her mind again. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Maya's heart sank, thinking her mother might be unavailable. Then the screen lit up with her mother's familiar face, and Maya felt both relief and overwhelming emotion wash over her. "Hey, sweetheart," her mother said, though Maya could immediately tell something was different. Her mother looked more alert than usual, and Maya could see she was in what appeared to be a different location than their previous calls. The background looked like some kind of briefing room. "Mom," Maya started, and then her voice broke completely. All the tears she thought she'd cried out earlier came flooding back. Her mother's expression immediately shifted to one of intense concern. "Maya, what's wrong? What happened?" Maya tried to speak between sobs. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. I tried to be strong like you always taught me, but I just can't handle it." "Handle what, honey?" "Tell me what's going on." Her mother's voice had taken on a tone Maya had never heard before, protective and fierce, like a mama bear ready to defend her cub. Through her tears, Maya finally told her mother everything. She started with that first day in history class, explaining how she'd mentioned her mother's service and how the other students had reacted. She described the weeks of mockery, the cruel social media posts, and how even her friends had abandoned her. Her mother's face grew darker with each detail Maya shared. Maya could see her jaw clenching, and her eyes narrowing in a way that would have been scary if directed at her, but instead made her feel protected. "And today," Maya continued, her voice shaking, "there was this Veterans Day assembly. I thought maybe if I tried again, in a setting where everyone was supposed to be honoring military families, maybe they'd finally listen." She told her mother about standing up in the auditorium, about Brad's cruel outburst, about running away in tears while hundreds of students laughed. By the time she finished describing her meeting with the principal, Maya was crying so hard she could barely speak. "They all think I'm lying about you. Mom, even the principal basically said she couldn't help me, because I don't have proof that you're really a SEAL. They think I'm just some attention-seeking kid making up stories." Maya's mother was quiet for a long moment after Maya finished her story. When she finally spoke, her voice was deadly calm, which Maya knew from experience meant she was absolutely furious. "Maya, I want you to listen to me very carefully," her mother said, looking directly into the camera. "First of all, I am so incredibly sorry that you've been going through this alone. You should have told me weeks ago." "I didn't want to worry you while you're deployed," Maya said quietly. "You have important things to do. Sweetheart, nothing is more important to me than you. Nothing. Do you understand that?" Her mother's voice softened slightly. "You are my daughter, and protecting you is my most important mission." "Whether I'm home or halfway around the world," Maya nodded, feeling a small spark of hope for the first time in weeks. "Now," her mother continued, and Maya could see that fierce look returning to her eyes, "here's what's going to happen. I've been scheduled to rotate back stateside next week for some training exercises and debriefing sessions." "Really?" Maya asked, her heart jumping. "You're coming home?" "I am. And I'm bringing some friends with me." Her mother's expression was now somewhere between protective and slightly scary. "You see, Maya, I've been working with a special training unit out here. We've been developing new protocols for integrated operations. 3 of my squad members happen to be rotating back to the same base as me." Maya wasn't sure where this was going, but she could tell her mother had some kind of plan forming. "I think it's time your classmates learned something about respect," her mother said, "and about what happens when you mess with a Navy SEAL's daughter." "What do you mean?" Maya asked, though she was starting to feel excited for the first time in weeks. Her mother leaned closer to the camera. Here's what we're going to do. I want you to go to school next week and act normal. Don't tell anyone I'm coming home. Can you do that? Maya nodded eagerly. I'm going to make some phone calls tonight. First, I'm calling your principal. I'm going to have a very polite conversation with her about documentation and proof. Her mother's smile was slightly predatory. Then I'm going to call your school district's superintendent. I think they need to understand what's been happening to my daughter. Mom, you don't have to... Maya started, but her mother held up a hand. Oh, but I do. You see, sweetheart, what those kids don't understand is that when you attack a military family, you're not just attacking one person. You're attacking all of us, and we take care of our own. Maya felt a thrill run through her. This was the mother she remembered from her childhood, the one who had scared away bullies at the playground just by showing up. But this time, it would be even better. What about your friends from your squad? Maya asked. Well, that's the interesting part, her mother said, her eyes twinkling with something that looked like mischief mixed with determination. It turns out that Lieutenant Rodriguez, Chief Petty Officer Chen, and Petty Officer Johnson are all going to be in town for the same training rotation. And coincidentally, they're all very interested in education and youth outreach. Maya wasn't entirely sure what her mother was planning, but she could tell it was going to be good. I've been thinking that maybe your school would benefit from a visit about military service and what it really means, her mother continued. Maybe a presentation about the different roles women serve in today's military. You know, educational content. Are you going to come to my school? Maya asked, hardly daring to believe it. Oh, yes, her mother said, and now she was definitely smiling. I think your history teacher, Mr. Patterson, would be very interested in having some guest speakers talk about modern military operations. And I'm quite sure your classmates would find it educational. Maya felt like she could barely contain her excitement. When? Next Friday. That gives me time to get back, rest up, and coordinate with my team. It also gives you time to prepare. Prepare how? Her mother's expression grew more serious. Maya, I need you to understand something. When we show up at your school, everything is going to change. These kids who have been making fun of you are going to realize they made a very big mistake. But I also need you to be ready to handle that change. What do you mean? I mean that after next Friday, nobody at your school is ever going to doubt your word again. But with that kind of respect comes responsibility. You're going to be known as the girl whose mother is a Navy SEAL, and that means you need to carry yourself like you deserve that respect. Maya nodded solemnly. I can do that. I know you can. You're my daughter, after all. Her mother smiled warmly. You've already shown more courage than most adults by standing up in that auditorium today. Even though it didn't go the way you hoped, you stood up for what was true. That takes real strength. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt proud of herself instead of ashamed. So what should I do until Friday? Maya asked. Just survive the week. Keep your head up. And remember that help is coming. Her mother paused. Oh, and Maya, you might want to make sure you're in that history class on Friday. You won't want to miss what happens. After they said goodbye and ended the call, Maya lay back on her bed feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Her mother was coming home, and she wasn't coming alone. Whatever happened next Friday, Maya knew her life at Jefferson High was about to change forever. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, Maya fell asleep with a smile on her face. Friday morning arrived with Maya feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness she'd never experienced before. She had managed to get through the entire week without telling anyone that her mother was coming home. It wasn't easy. She'd had to bite her tongue several times when Brad and his friends made their usual cruel comments about her imaginary Navy SEAL mom. Maya chose her outfit carefully that morning. She wore the small trident pin her mother had given her years ago, but this time she wore it proudly on the outside of her shirt instead of hiding it beneath. Today, she wouldn't be ashamed of who her mother was. The first few periods of the day crawled by slowly. Maya kept checking the clock, knowing that her mother had said they'd arrive during third period, her AP history class. The same class where this whole nightmare had started weeks ago. When the bell rang for third period, Maya's heart began racing. She walked into Mr. Patterson's classroom and took her usual seat in the back corner. Her classmates filed in, chatting and laughing as always. completely unaware that their world was about to be turned upside down. Brad slumped into his seat in the middle of the room, surrounded by his usual group of friends. Maya could hear him making jokes about yesterday's football practice, acting like he owned the place. Soon, she thought, his attitude would change completely. Mr. Patterson stood at the front of the classroom, shuffling through his papers as students settled into their seats. He looked a bit nervous today, though Maya was probably the only one who noticed. Her mother had mentioned she'd spoken with him earlier in the week about guest speakers. "All right, class," Mr. Patterson began, clearing his throat. "Today we have something special planned. We're going to continue our unit on modern military operations, and I've arranged for some very special guests to speak with us." A few students perked up with mild interest, but most continued their side conversations. Maya gripped the edges of her desk, her palms sweating with anticipation. "Our speakers are currently serving members of the United States Navy," Mr. Patterson continued. "They've volunteered to share their experiences and answer questions about military service in the 21st century. Just then, there was a firm knock on the classroom door. The sound was authoritative and commanding, not like the gentle taps teachers usually gave each other. "Come in," Mr. Patterson called out, and Maya could hear the slight nervousness in his voice. The door opened and Maya's breath caught in her throat. Her mother stepped into the classroom first, wearing her full-dress blue uniform with all her ribbons and medals displayed proudly across her chest. She looked absolutely magnificent, tall, confident, and radiating the kind of authority that made people automatically straighten their spines. Behind her came 3 other women, also in full military dress. They moved with the same controlled precision as Maya's mother, their eyes scanning the room like they were assessing a potential battlefield. The classroom fell completely silent. Maya could see her classmates' mouths hanging open in shock as they took in the sight of 4 highly decorated military women standing at the front of their classroom. "Good morning," Maya's mother said, her voice carrying easily through the suddenly quiet room. "I'm Commander Rodriguez, United States Navy. These are my colleagues, Lieutenant Martinez, Chief Petty Officer Chen, and Petty Officer Johnson." Maya watched as Brad's face went from confused to worried to absolutely pale as he began to understand what was happening. "We're here today to talk about military service, particularly the role of women in today's armed forces," Commander Rodriguez continued, her eyes scanning the classroom until they found Maya. She gave her daughter the smallest nod and smile before continuing. "But first, I understand there's been some confusion in this classroom about what women can and cannot do in the military. Specifically, I've been told that some students believe women cannot serve as Navy SEALs." The silence in the room was deafening. Maya could practically hear her classmates' hearts beating as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Lieutenant Martinez stepped forward. "I graduated from Navy SEAL training 3 years ago," she said matter-of-factly. "I've completed 4 overseas deployments and received 2 Bronze Stars for valor in combat operations." Chief Petty Officer Chen was next. "I've been a Navy SEAL for 7 years. I've served in 3 different theaters of operation and currently lead a special training unit for new recruits." Petty Officer Johnson, who looked barely older than some of the students, spoke last. "I'm the youngest woman ever to complete Navy SEAL training. I finished at the top of my class and have already been selected for advanced specialized operations." Maya watched as her classmates absorbed this information. She could see several students glancing nervously in her direction, finally beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been lying after all. But Commander Rodriguez wasn't finished. "Now, I want to address something specific that's been happening in this classroom," she said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "It has come to my attention that my daughter has been subjected to harassment, mockery, and bullying because she told the truth about her mother's military service." Maya felt every eye in the classroom turn toward her, but for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel embarrassed or ashamed. Instead, she sat up straighter in her chair, meeting their stares with confidence. "Let me be very clear about something," Commander Rodriguez continued, stepping closer to the students' desks. "When you mock a military child, you're not just hurting that child. You're disrespecting their family's service and sacrifice. You're showing contempt for the very people who risk their lives to protect your freedom." Brad, who had been shrinking lower and lower in his seat, now looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Several other students who had joined in the mockery over the past weeks were staring at their desks, unable to meet the commander's intense gaze. "My daughter has spent months of her life without her mother because I was deployed overseas, serving my country," Commander Rodriguez said. "She's missed holidays, birthdays, and school events because of my service. She's carried the weight of worry every single day, wondering if her mother would come home safely." Maya felt tears pricking at her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of pride and vindication. And instead of receiving support and understanding from her classmates, the very people whose freedom I was fighting to protect, she was called a liar. She was isolated, mocked, and made to feel ashamed of her family's service. The commander's voice grew quieter, but somehow more intimidating. "I want each of you to think about that. I want you to think about how it would feel if someone called your family liars. If someone mocked your parents' job or your family's sacrifices." Lieutenant Martinez stepped forward again. "We don't expect you to automatically believe extraordinary claims without evidence," she said. "But we do expect you to treat your classmates with basic respect and kindness, especially when they're sharing something personal about their families. Moreover," Chief Petty Officer Chen added, "a simple internet search would have shown you that women have been serving as Navy SEALs since 2016, when the military opened all combat roles to women. Your assumptions were not just cruel, they were factually incorrect." Maya could see several students pulling out their phones, probably to verify this information for themselves. She almost laughed at how easy it would have been for them to fact-check her story instead of immediately assuming she was lying. Commander Rodriguez walked over to Maya's desk. "Maya, would you please stand up?" Maya stood, her legs feeling shaky but her spirit soaring. "Class, I'd like you to meet my daughter. She's shown more courage and integrity in the past few weeks than most adults show in a lifetime. She stood up for the truth even when everyone around her refused to believe it. She endured mockery and isolation rather than backing down from what she knew was right." Maya felt her mother's hand rest gently on her shoulder. "Maya, I want you to show them the pin you're wearing." Maya lifted the small trident pin so the class could see it clearly. "My mom gave this to me when I was 12, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "She told me it represented honor, courage, and commitment. She said that as long as I wore it, I should remember to always stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." "Especially when it's hard," her mother corrected gently. The classroom remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Tommy, the boy who had been kind to Maya in chemistry class, raised his hand. "Ma'am," he said to Commander Rodriguez, "I'm sorry we didn't believe Maya. We should have listened to her instead of making fun of her." "Thank you for that apology," Commander Rodriguez replied. "But you shouldn't be apologizing to me. You should be apologizing to Maya." Tommy turned to Maya. "I'm really sorry, Maya. You were telling the truth, and we were jerks for not believing you." Slowly, other students began to speak up. Some offered apologies, others asked questions about military service, and a few admitted they felt ashamed of how they'd treated Maya. Brad was one of the last to speak. His face was red with embarrassment, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "Maya, I'm really sorry. I was totally wrong, and I was mean to you for no reason. Your mom she's incredible. You must be really proud of her." Maya looked at Brad for a moment, then nodded. "I am proud of her. I always have been." As the class period wound down, Maya realized that everything had changed. She was no longer the girl everyone thought was a liar. She was the girl whose mother was a decorated Navy SEAL, whose family served their country with honor, and who had shown incredible strength in the face of adversity. But more importantly, she was still just Maya, the same person she'd always been, but now with the confidence to be proud of who she was and where she came from. After the other students filed out of the classroom, Maya's mother stayed behind to give her daughter a long, tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," she whispered. "You handled that beautifully." "Thanks for coming, Mom," Maya whispered back. "Thanks for showing them who you really are." No, her mother said, pulling back to look Maya in the eyes. Thanks for showing them who you really are. You're my daughter, Maya. You're strong, brave, and honest, just like I taught you to be. Never forget that. As they walked out of the school together, Maya realized that this experience, as painful as it had been, had taught her something valuable. Sometimes standing up for the truth means standing alone. But when you have the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard, the truth will always find a way to shine through.